Weekends. Thank you all for joining. Today is May 8th, 2022. We are having an Israeli-Palestinian Confederation simulation. For those of you who speak Arabic or English, we have both interpreters. The English-Arabic interpreter is Tahsin. Tahsin, could you make the announcement in Arabic? Thank you. And Judith, could you please make the announcement in Hebrew? I did not hear her announcement. Was the announcement made in Hebrew?
For some reason, we can't hear Judith at the moment.
Okay, well, we are going to continue. Now we can you make the announcement in Hebrew, please? Thank you. This is the Israeli-Palestinian Confederation simulation. We are simulating how a common government for the people of Israel and Palestine, based on democratic principles. And when I say Israel and Palestine, I mean the geographic area of Israel, the West Bank, Gaza, and Jerusalem. 14 million people. We believe that a common government could be created for all these people based on democratic principles, based on equality, based on three branches of government: the parliament, the executive, the government, and the judicial, equal to the Israelis and the Palestinians, that would be in existence together with the Israeli and the Palestinian government, that it would be a legitimate government for the entire area. And we are simulating how this could become reality and how it could function and how it could make peace. My name is Joseph Avasar. For those of you who want to send me messages, please use my email, josephavassar@gmail.com. We have a website. The website is ipconfederation.org. It is in three languages: Arabic, Hebrew, and English. If you go to the English version, you can go to all the versions, but for demonstration purposes, I'm going to the English version. And if you go to the Constitution, you'll see how this common government will function, what's the vision of this government, how it could make peace, how it could be elected based on equality for the people of Israel, the West Bank, Gaza, and Jerusalem, 14 million people with three branches of government. It's very interesting reading. And however, if you prefer, you can go to the frequently asked questions and read this, the same, more or less the same material in a frequently asked question. So that makes it easier. Today we have our guest, Lawrence Wilkerson. He was the chief of staff to the late Secretary of State, Colin Powell. He was, Mr. Wilkerson was the previous chief of staff to the Secretary of State, Colin Powell. He is a distinguished visiting professor of government and public policy at the College of William and Mary Williamsburg in Williamsburg, Virginia. He served 31 years in the US Army. His final military assignments were special assistant to then chairman of the US Joint Chief of Staff, General Colin Powell, and later deputy director and director of the US Marine Corps War College in Quantico, Virginia. He is currently a senior fellow at the Eisenhower Media Network. He's a senior non-resident fellow at the Quincy Institute for Responsible Statecraft and the co-founder with Major General Dennis Lake, who is retired, of the All-Volunteer Force Forum. So that you know, we invite people of all points of views. The more points of views, the better. And we are inviting people to stress test our formula for peace based on a common government for the people of Israel and Palestine. Mr. Wilkerson is one of those people, but we have more people coming up, and we had many people in the past. Next week, on May 15, we're going to have a debate with Professor Alan Dershowitz. Is Israel a democracy? My point of view is that Israel is not a democracy. But not only that, I believe that if Israel was a democracy, it would have included the people of Israel and Palestine. And if that was made on day one, meaning in 1948, if it was a true democracy since 1948, we would not have seen the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. There would not have been an Israeli-Palestinian conflict because the Israeli people, the Palestinian people, the Jewish people, Muslim, Christians, would have been all in the same country, under the same system, under a democracy. My point of view is that Israel is not a democracy, and because of that, the conflict is going on since in the last 74 years. So that's my point of view. Mr. Dershowitz thinks otherwise, and we will be debating that issue next week on May 15 at the same hour. So it's on Sunday, May 15, the same hour. On May 22nd, we have Bassam Aramin and Rami Al-Hanan. They are both parents of children that they lost their children as a result of this war. And they have their own perspective, and they will be speaking to us about, we're going to subject them to the same issues that we have here, is asking them to stress test our formula for peace. So that should be very, very interesting. I heard both of them speak. They're excellent, and they have very deep understanding of the conflict, and they're really beyond the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. They have lived that conflict in their own personal life, and they understand what it does. And I think that they're very, very articulate. It would be very interesting conversation. On June 5th, we have Avigdor Feldman. He is the founder of B'Tselem. B'Tselem is a peace organization that is designed to document what's happening in the West Bank. He is an extremely articulate lawyer. He's a civil rights lawyer. He's very, very honest. And it's going to be a pleasure to interview him and to have him part of this simulation. By the way, we are really not interviewing people. This is a simulation. We are asking them to tell us their opinion about the formula that we are presenting. So that would be very interesting as well. And then Professor Muhammad Dajani Daoudi, he's a Palestinian peace activist. I had an exchange with him. He believes in the two-state solution. He thinks that the two-state solution should be first and then everything else. And I'm going to ask him, why does it have to be first? Why do we have to have the two-state solution as the only solution before anything else, when the two-state solution have failed for the last 74 years? Why does it? We are not against the two-state solution, but we are against the idea that it has to be first and no other solution before. So that should be a pretty interesting conversation, maybe a little bit hostile, but on the constructive side. And then we're going to have Richard Boyd Barrett. He is a Irish parliament member. You remember in Ireland, they had similar issues. He's with the People Before Profit Solidarity Party. He's very, very interesting. He's very involved with the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. And his conversation with us would be very interesting as well. So that we are not bringing people to just speak to us. You've noticed that we are bringing people to cross-examine them. We're not to cross-examine them. Why not? Why is the Israelis and the Palestinians not able to make peace? What's wrong with our formula? So when I am looking for people to invite, they are told that they will be subjected to strong issues and strong questioning. The estimated simulation time today, we usually take 120 minutes. It's going to be several segments. I already met with Mr. Wilkerson. He chose the segments that he wants to speak about, and we will vote on those segments. We will vote on the Constitution, etc. And then we will have Mr. Wilkerson give us his opinion regarding each segment. And then hopefully we'll have conversation and question and answer with Mr. Wilkerson regarding the totality of the picture. And then we'll have closing remarks. And so that some of you are new, we have a video that explains what the formula, the IPC formula is. I would like to play it for you. It's 2.5 minutes. Just watch this video. Thank you.
The conflict between Israelis and Palestinians has endured for generations. And instead of time healing the wounds, it's only caused the anger to fester and the violence to grow. But what if there was a way to alleviate the tension? Something that may not outright solve every problem, but at least create a forum that encourages a peaceful compromise. Welcome to the Israeli-Palestinian Confederation, a common third government between the Israeli and Palestinian citizens, specifically designed to foster peace, tolerance, and economic prosperity between the two nations. Here's how it works. First off, both Israel and Palestine will keep their respective governments. Israel's Knesset and the Palestinian National Authority will remain unchanged. The Israeli-Palestinian Confederation, IPC, will be a third entity acting as a unifying agent between the two. The IPC will comprise 300 parliament members elected from 300 districts in Israel, the West Bank, and Gaza. Above them will preside a president and vice president, one Israeli and one Palestinian. In order for the IPC to pass a law, it will require a 55% majority from its Israeli representatives, as well as a 55% majority from its Palestinian representatives, thereby preventing either side from monopolizing the legislature. Of course, the IPC won't undermine the political power of either the Israeli or the Palestinian government. At any time, Israel or Palestine may veto a law passed by the IPC. If neither side vetoes, the law is passed, and the two nations are another step closer to resolution. Please help us make this a reality. The Israeli-Palestinian Confederation. We might speak different languages, but we all mean the same thing.
There is no voice.
There was no voice?
Yes, for me, yes.
Okay, I apologize. I don't know how to correct it.
No, there was a voice. I heard it. It
We heard
be his-
everything.
Must be his computer. His
Okay.
sound may not be on.
Okay, I apologize. Okay,
Yeah,
so
I had everything.
we have a pre-simulation survey. We're asking you to vote on this pre-simulation survey. We're asking you, do you support at this time a common government for the people in Israel, the West Bank, Gaza, and Jerusalem that will coexist with the Israeli and the Palestinian government? At the end of the meeting today, we will take another survey to see if there was a change of opinion. So Dan, can you put the survey on right now? And I'm going to be asking all of you, do you support at this time, do you support the creation of a common government for the people of Israel and Palestine? Okay, so we have, okay, let's allow it a little bit more time for people to vote. Okay, and can you end the polling? And okay, so at this time we have 18 yes and 5 no. And can you stop sharing? And at the end of the meeting today, we will, we haven't, yeah, okay. At the end of the meeting, we'll have another survey and we'll see if we change minds, if some people change their mind. Okay, so can you stop sharing and the objective of the simulation is to show that a common government could make peace between the Israelis and the Palestinians, but not only between the Israelis and the Palestinians, with the entire area, with Lebanon, Syria, Egypt. I know there is peace with Egypt, but for the whole area, peace with Egypt, Jordan, Iran, the whole area. And of course, the Israelis and the Palestinians. We're trying not to have a historical review of who is to blame. This is not the subject of our simulation today. We, as an organization, we are not anti-Israel or anti-Palestinian. We are pro-peace. And I believe that when the common government will be created, it would not be anti-Israel or anti-Palestinian, it would be pro-peace. We are asking you as the audience, when you participate, not to digress from the simulation objective. We are not here to litigate who is at fault. We're here to discuss the issues on how a common government would function and whether or not it will make peace. Mr. Wilkerson is not a representative of the IPC. He was invited to participate in the stress test, to give his opinion. We don't really know what his opinions are. I had a conversation with him. I have an inclination, but we did not really ask him for his opinion. Like I said, we are pro-peace. We have our own narrative. Our own narrative is for the peace of the whole area. We are not the Israeli narrative or the Palestinian narrative. And I anticipate that when the common government will be created, it will have its own narrative because it will be the government for the whole area. So it will have a different perspective, not the Israeli perspective or the Palestinian perspective. And like I said, we are not precluding other formulas for peace, and we welcome other organizations to present their formulas for peace and be subjected to the same stress test that we are subjecting ourselves to. And the common government would be able to adopt many formulas for peace because it would be a common parliament. We will ask Mr. Wilkerson to judge our plan based on these three criteria. And I just want to remind you, Mr. Wilkerson was the chief of staff for the late Secretary of State, Colin Powell. So he knows from the inside, the American perspective. He dealt with these issues day in and day out. And we will be asking him, the formula that we are presenting to you, could it make peace? Could it attain peace? That's question number one. Is it implementable? Could we create a common government? And the last question, is there a downside to the Israelis or the Palestinians? So hopefully he will answer those questions for us. We have many legislations to demonstrate how, many proposals, I'm correcting myself, proposal for legislation to demonstrate how a common government could make peace. But we're not able to show you all of them because we're limited by time. So what we are showing you is the tip of the iceberg, but we're asking you to look at the big picture, avoid technical arguments, and we're asking you to refrain from comments, but asking you to ask questions. We are encouraging questions. So if I show you an airplane, a picture of an airplane, and you say, Joseph, how does this thing fly? That's a question. We encourage questions. I put a block on my phone, but it's still. But if I ask, if you show me the picture and you say, well, I never board an airplane, that's a comment. I'm asking you to ask questions, please. I'm encouraging questions, but keep your comments to the chat and keep your comments to the end. All right. Certain facts and assumptions. The Israeli Prime Minister in this simulation, we will ask someone to be a Prime Minister. He represents the Israelis only. That's a fact. The Palestinian leader represents the Palestinian only. These are the assumptions that we are asking you to make. First, that we just concluded an online election meaning election on the internet, that we had a platform on the internet and we allowed the 14 million people in the last 3 months to vote for the president and to vote for their parliament leaders. So we want you to assume that the election took place in the last 3 months and people voted. And we allowed 14 million people to vote. When I say 14 million people, it's really not exactly 14 million because we are excluding minors, but we are excluding minors on an equal basis on the Israeli and the Palestinian side. So let's say we over the age of 18 and will be allowed to vote, but they represent the 14 million people. You also want you to assume that 5 million out of the 14 million people voted, and 3 million Palestinian voted, and 2 million Israelis voted. So that's total of 5 million people. I also want you to assume that Joseph, was elected as president. And like I said before, I'm not intending to run for president, but just for purposes of facilitating this conversation, I want you to assume that I was elected by 1.5 million votes, and that 1.3 million votes went to a Palestinian lady. She will become president in 2 years. I will become vice president. And each of us has constitutional duties under the Constitution. That each parliament, I'm going to have to close my phone because I'm sorry, because I'm getting calls, and even though I put on do not disturb. Also, I want you to assume that each member of parliament represents 47,000 people. So the 300 parliament members, they represent their district of 47,000 people. Does anyone have any questions regarding those assumptions? Mr. Wilkerson, do you have any questions regarding those assumptions?
No, I do not.
Do you have any objection to conducting a simulation with assumptions?
Not at all.
Okay. When you were in the military, as I remember, you were 31 years in the military. Did you, when you did exercises or preparation for war, did you have to simulate?
Yes, we often did. We called it wargaming. Later on in my time, we began to use the term simulation, which is probably a little more apt.
Okay.
Did it quite often.
So, so you simulated or war game in the military?
Yes, quite a bit.
Okay.
Several times each year for 31 years.
I see. So it does. So if the military does simulation or war games, does it make sense to have peace simulation or peace games?
Yes, I've actually participated in several of those too with the U.S. Institute of Peace. All have assumptions, of course, and usually game players try to fight the assumptions, but that's not the way you should do it.
Okay. All right. So does the audience have any questions regarding the assumption? And please shout out, because if you raise your hand, I do not see it. I have because of the PowerPoint presentation, I do not see raised hands. So just shout out. Okay. So I just wanted to emphasize that, in my opinion, the assumptions are achievable. A war between Gaza and Israel cost 1 day of war is $100 million per day. 1 day of war, full-fledged war between Israel and Gaza. With $100 million, 1 day of war, I believe these assumptions, in other words, let me just review those assumptions. To have online elections for 14 million people, 5 million people voting, to have a president and vice president and 300 parliament members are all achievable, in my opinion. But we'll deal with it later. And they're all achievable with the expense of 1 day of war. 1 day of war. So now I'm going to be asking you, this is a simulation. We need people to volunteer. I need someone to volunteer to be the Hamas leader. Do I have a Hamas leader? Is someone willing to volunteer to be a Hamas leader? Please. It's not going to bite you. I need your help. I need you to assume that you are the Hamas leader and you're going to be reacting to what's going on as a Hamas leader. It doesn't reflect on you in any way, shape, or form. It just reflects on you willing to have the imagination and the ability to think like someone else. So do I have a Hamas leader? And I need a P.
Yes, I'll do it. I'll be a Hamas leader.
Okay, Libby, thank you. Do I have a PA leader? PA meaning Palestinian Authority President. Do I have a PA leader?
Dr. Anwar raised his hand.
Dr. Anwar, okay. And do I have a Israeli Prime Minister?
Sure, Glenn Bennett.
Okay. I like Len as the Israeli Prime Minister because he helps us demonstrate how this thing will work. The rest of you, I'm going to be asking you to become either Israeli parliament member or Palestinian parliament member. And you'll have to decide which one you are Israeli or Palestinian. The way to do it is choose a city. This area is either in the West Bank on Gaza or in Israel. And I want you to imagine that you are representing 47,000 people. So you are not really representing the entire area, the entire people of Israel or the entire people of the Palestinians. You represent your area. You want to do what's best for your area, not best for necessarily for Israel or for the Palestinian, but for your area. Why? Because you ran on the platform that you are the best parliament candidate to do good for your area. And you want your constituents to approve of you, and you want your constituents to vote for you again. Some of your areas may be Israelis and Palestinians together, a mixed area. And some, let's say if you're in Tel Aviv, would probably be exclusively Israeli area. Or if you are in Gaza, it would be exclusively Palestinian. But if you are in Jerusalem, it may be mixed. So I'm not gonna, please decide what's your district in your own head and be consistent in your voting based on your area. So let's take a vote to see how many we have right now. Let's have only the Palestinian parliament members vote first. Please vote. Palestinian parliament members. Okay, can you end the polling? We have 11 Palestinian parliament members. And now, share the results, please. And have the Israeli parliament members, please vote. Okay. And we have, can you end the polling? We have 8 Israeli parliament members. I see more people are coming, so can you stop sharing? So perfect, we have 11 Palestinian parliament members, 8 Israeli parliament members, and we have a separate government, and the separate government is that of Hamas, the PA, and the Israeli Prime Minister. And I am the president of the whole area of Israel and Palestine. So we already created the government, we had the election, and now we are moving to the next phase. Okay. So this is the Constitution. It's 2 pages. Libby, could you please read the first page of the Constitution?
We believe that Palestinians and Israelis are entitled to equal rights under the law and guaranteed human rights and freedom. The Israeli-Palestinian Confederation does not intend to supersede or supplant the Palestinian or Israeli governments, nor to abrogate or undermine any agreements between those governments. We recognize the need to work with the Israeli and Palestinian governments. Our purpose is to resolve conflicts and to expand the relationship between Palestinians and Israelis in a fair and equitable manner. We believe in equal rights under the law, guaranteed human rights, and freedom for all.
Okay, so the important part here, and by the way, this is not word by word in the Constitution. This is an explanation of the Constitution. The Constitution is on our website. The important thing in this, in my opinion, is that we say we are the government of the whole area. We are a legitimate government, but we recognize that the Israelis and the Palestinians have their government. We recognize that they can reach any agreement between them, and we are going to honor those agreements. We're not going to undermine those agreements. We're not going to supersede. They can reach any agreement, and constitutionally, we are obliged to respect and accept any agreements between the Israeli and the Palestinian governments. So let's go to page 2. Sorry. Okay, Libby, could you please read this?
We voluntarily give the legislatures and the governments of Israel and Palestine veto power over legislation we pass relating to the domain of control of those governments. We believe in the separation of power between the legislative, executive, and judicial branches. We believe in the creation of a permanent secular government for all the people residing in Israel and Palestine. We believe in having a separate judicial branch relating to IPC legislation with Israeli and Palestinian judges, with a system to avoid biased decisions based on nationality.
Okay, so the significant part, in my opinion, here is that we say, if we pass legislation that affects the Israeli or the Palestinian government's domain of control, we give them a veto power. We recognize their power. We recognize that we need their cooperation. And when we pass the legislation, if it violates their domain and control, they have veto power. Each one of them have veto power. And if they each one exercise the veto power, it's not going to pass. So does anyone have any questions regarding this Constitution or this explanation of the Constitution? Questions, please shout them out. Okay, so hearing no questions, we are going to have, we're going to take a vote. Palestinian parliament members, please vote first on the Constitution. Do you ratify the Constitution? Okay, let's end the polling. 11 out of 11 Palestinian parliament members voted yes, 100%. Let's stop sharing. Let's go to the Israeli parliament members. Do you support now the Israelis only? Do you support the Israeli-Palestinian Confederation Constitution? Okay. Okay, can you end the polling? we have 9 Israeli parliament members, 7 voted to ratify the Constitution, 2 voted no, I'm sorry, 2 voted no. So the parliament members, in reality, the parliament members who voted no will be removed from the parliament because they, when they ran for the Confederation, they signed documents that said, just like any other government around the world, that they believe in the Constitution, and they are now refusing to ratify the Constitution, and the parliament cannot have members who are not supporting the Constitution, and in reality, they would be removed. And those in their district who received the second number of votes will become parliament members. So let's go to Mr. Wilkerson and give us his opinion regarding the momentous event that just took place, which is the passing of a constitution for the people of Israel and Palestine together.
Clearly, this is a first step that has to take place, and the fact that we've just achieved it, even if it's only in a simulation, indicates to me that there are people who would, in a real situation, as it were, vote for such a constitution. I think it would be politically dangerous not to, if it came about the way we just did it.
It would be politically dangerous to do what?
If you didn't vote for the Constitution and you yet thought you were going to remain in the government.
Yeah, so it does make sense to remove them, especially when they agreed to accept the Constitution when they ran for the parliament.
In most governments, including our own here in the United States, you would have to take some sort of oath with regard to the Constitution.
So if an American congressman or senator refuses to pledge allegiance to the U.S. Constitution, would he be able to remain a senator or a congressman?
Who knows in this world we live in today, but in the past, I think it's rather definitive that he would not be seated. He or she would not be seated.
Okay, so Mr. Wilkerson, you worked as the chief of staff for Colin Powell, and he was a Secretary of State. The State Department is a very large department with brilliant people. And my question to you is, why is an approach of this nature was not contemplated by the State Department in order to make peace between the Israelis and the Palestinians?
You would need to give me several hours to discuss that. In a short answer, though, a concise answer, I would say the political winds never would have allowed it. And when I say political winds, I mean those blowing from Tel Aviv at the time and those blowing around Washington.
Okay, so do you think they would allow it now or ever?
That's the question of the hour, is it not? Perhaps the question of this entire simulation. I think if you presented the vote, if you held the vote and you presented the vote as you have assumed it to have taken place here, I don't believe they would have a choice.
Okay, so when you say they, who do you mean by they?
Both
The
sides.
American?
Well, all three sides, I should say, or all four sides, Palestinians, Israelis, and US.
Okay, so they wouldn't really have a choice but to accept this formula.
I think that's the case. If, as I said, you assume that you had 14,000 people vote, or a rough adulthood within that 14,000, and they voted to have this this government.
Or would they be able to prevent it? Would they have the ability or the face to be against it if it was in fact taking place?
Well, you said 5,000 people voted out of the
5 million.
eligible-
5
or
million.
5 million. I'm sorry, 5 million out of the eligible 14 million. I think the United States would have no choice. The two Palestinian entities and the Israeli government, of course, they would have a choice as to whether or not they try to repudiate it, but I think it would be politically infeasible for them to do so. I think they would probably wait and see what happens. And having veto authority on both parts, the Palestinian, the two parts, the Palestinian and the Israelis, would give them some reason to go ahead, if nothing else than to prove in the long run, if they were really against it, that it wouldn't work.
So let me ask you a blunt question. Do you believe all these entities, the Israeli government, the Palestinian governments, the Hamas government, the American government, do they really want peace?
That's a loaded question. As far as the United States, yeah, as far as the United States goes, there are a considerable number of people with whom I've interfaced over the past half century, certainly from Jimmy Carter forward, who do want peace. I'm not sure there are those kinds of people in quantity in any of the Palestinian entities or in Israel.
So if the people want peace, when I said the people, I mean the Israeli and the Palestinian people, those that are not political and do not have a stake in this, it would make sense for them to create their own system, to rise up and create their own system.
About that, I think you are correct. And I suspect that you are correct in estimating that there's a considerable majority in all camps that want peace.
Okay, so let's go to the first issue, and that is granting a veto power. So the Confederation, we are a government of the entire people of Israel, the West Bank, and Gaza. We just voted, we just elected people. And we are, this is a declaration, is that, could you read that, please, Libby, please, from we
Sure.
hereby.
Okay. The Confederation is the government of the entire population of Israel, the West Bank, and Gaza. We hereby bestow a veto power relating to legislation affecting sovereignty to the following: the government of Israel, the Palestinian Authority, Hamas. In the event of changes in governments, this legislation may be amended or repealed.
So does anyone have any question regarding this declaration? And by the way, go
I
ahead.
have one question, if I may.
Sure.
That phraseology regarding sovereignty, does that presume that there might be something that would be pending before the parliament that they would determine did not affect sovereignty, and so it would not be therefore subject to this veto?
Yes, absolutely. Our budget, for example,
Okay.
or whether to impeach a parliament or the president or the vice president, or where to buy properties to have our offices, what uniform our police officers should wear. All of this are not subject to the sovereignty of the government of Israel or the Palestinian.
So basically administrative.
Correct.
Okay.
Any other questions?
Why is it that the areas concerned are Israel, the West Bank, and Gaza, but the elephant in the room is not there? Jerusalem and the settlers in the settlements, the current ones.
Oh, they are all there.
They're all there. Where is Jerusalem? I don't see the name here. Why is the word? Why is the word Jerusalem not mentioned in that first point?
We are the government of the area of Israel, the West Bank, Gaza, and Jerusalem.
And it includes the annexed areas of this region. Does it include the annexed Jerusalem and the annexed Golan Heights, for example?
Yes, it does. It includes 14 million people.
Yes, but
In Israel, the Golan Heights, West Bank, Jerusalem, and Gaza.
okay, but okay, why is it's to me a little conspicuous that it does not have the specific name of Jerusalem amongst the areas, number one. And that is a crucial point that I think needs to be put in there, with West Jerusalem and East Jerusalem, for example, to make it clear.
And why do we need to make that distinction? How is that serving our purposes?
Why do we need to put the West Bank and not put Jerusalem? Why do we need to put Gaza but forget about Jerusalem?
No, this is just a map to help the participants to choose what area they are representing in the simulation. We are not giving a priority.
Yeah, sorry, I'm not referring to the map per se. I'm referring to the Constitution, the very first point. If you go back to it, please. As to the areas it represents.
In the Constitution?
Okay, maybe it does. Let me see. There's assumptions, okay.
Back on the very first page, it does say Jerusalem.
Does it?
Where?
Even before that, before the,
Either way.
keep going back, there. No, yeah, see Gaza, Jerusalem? Israel, West
At
Bank,
this
Gaza,
time, do you support a common government for the people? This is for the survey. It's not
Okay.
part of the Constitution. But
Okay, yeah, here it is mentioned in this particular slide.
right,
I was referring to a previous slide before as to the Constitution, and it doesn't include the word Jerusalem, the city. So I was wondering why it was not included there. The West Bank, Gaza, and Israel were included.
okay, this is just a text. What you see here is a text for the survey that we are conducting among the people that are participating in this simulation. Are you supporting this? Okay,
Yes.
we are not,
In this one, it does include the word Jerusalem.
Right,
And that's why
right,
I
right. Okay,
supported that.
okay.
Yeah.
Okay, and you're saying it is not included in the Constitution?
It's
Where it says, we believe,
the point you had just before this slide did not have the word Jerusalem in it before the map.
Oh, okay, let me
I
check.
was wondering how come it wasn't included there. That's what I was referring to. I will.
Okay,
This here?
I don't see it now. It's not.
I
the
think he means where it says we believe in we can there can be one government for the people of, and then it lists, is that the,
We reckon,
I'm.
okay, but I'm sure you saw it somewhere,
Okay, I will.
but we are not referring to a city at all in any of in the Constitution. In fact, I don't think in the Constitution, we are referring to a map. We are referring to the area of Israel and Palestine in general.
And this is where my real question is. If Jerusalem is not mentioned, it is as though one can mistake it to mean that it is an acceptance of Israel, of Jerusalem being only part of Israel. If that's the case, we need to make that distinction.
We are not saying that at all. The impression that you get that not mentioning the word Jerusalem by implication means that it belongs to Israel.
Yes.
Is a completely unreasonable conclusion.
Okay.
Why would you conclude that if we do not mention the word Jerusalem, we
Only
believe that
because
it
it
belongs
is-
to Israel?
Only because it is the most contested area, and it's been annexed by Israel, and therefore it should be mentioned as a distinct word, as a distinct city, I think. But
Yeah,
anyway, I won't take more of your time on it. Sorry.
Okay, all right, no
But-
problem, no
Excuse me,
problem.
We can
Joseph,
move
I
on
think
and we'll see.
Joseph, excuse me, I think what the gentleman has said is
Here
of
it is.
great
That's what I was
importance.
referring to right here.
I think it's of great importance what the gentleman has said, and perhaps Joseph, you might amend it. That's up to you. I certainly agree with what the fellow participant has just said about Jerusalem. It's of immense importance, immense importance. Sorry for interrupting.
Are you talking about this declaration?
No, Joseph, I am talking about what the gentleman whose name I don't remember has just said about Jerusalem. I understand him when he says that, and I agree with him
Okay, so
about the immense importance of Jerusalem.
I am not doubting the immense importance of Jerusalem, but are you saying that not mentioning the word Jerusalem has political implication of somehow?
Yes.
Okay,
It
so could
has
you-
political implication, a very big political implications.
Okay, so what's the political implication of not mentioning the word Jerusalem, and how do you reach that implication from not mentioning the word Jerusalem?
Another solution will be to include the word occupied territories. And that implies
Look,
Jerusalem and the Gaza and the West Bank.
I'm not sure there is a problem before we jump into a solution. Please answer my question. Why do you think that not mentioning the word Jerusalem has political implication?
Because it takes it for granted. The way I see it, and reading this, I would take it for granted that when you say the population of Israel, you are meaning it to include the annexed areas of Palestine and Syria, for example. So
Okay, I think I understand what you're saying. Are you saying that by implication, not mentioning the word Jerusalem implies exclusion of Jerusalem? Is that what
It may implies that Jerusalem belongs to Israel. That it may implies.
Okay, so do you, the way I see it, Jerusalem is in the West Bank and in Israel. but if you, I have no objection to granting this veto power to add the word Jerusalem.
Sorry.
I think
all-
we're getting out of control here. What we're discussing is final status solution of setting up 2 states. This is not what this is about
No,
right
we're
now.
not.
Yeah, I agree with
So-
Len.
We're not here to talk about two-state, Len, at all.
That's
Okay.
right.
No.
Let's stop talking about Jerusalem.
Right.
Because
I
Jerusalem
think,
is
I
part of
think
the whole.
Anwar and Abraham are both getting hung up on something, but what's implied in the creation of the voting and the selection of parliament members is that the entire area is represented without consideration to existing political lines.
Right.
Now,
Yeah.
and
Okay, so let's take a vote. This is for the Palestinian parliament members. Do you support this declaration? Okay, can you publish the vote? 10 out of 12 voted yes, so the Palestinian parliament members voted yes. Let's have the Israeli parliament members vote. Okay, can you publish the vote? 7 out of 8 Israelis voted to have the veto power to the all these 3 entities. Let's have Mr. Wilkerson give us his opinion regarding this declaration that was just passed.
Well, I find it hard to believe that there would be anyone who would not vote for the veto power for whatever purpose on either side of what you might call the political divide, because that would seem to me to be essential with all 3 entities, that they be able to negate, as it were, any legislation that they disagreed with that comes forth from this parliament.
What would happen if the Confederation government decides not to give a veto power, let's say, to the government of Israel?
Well, in my view, that would kill it right off the bat.
Right, and would that be the same for the Palestinian Authority and Hamas?
Probably, yes,
Yeah.
in my view.
All right, yeah, that's my views too. All right, so let's go to the first issue. This is a Confederation police force. Libby, could you please read the first issue, Confederation police force?
Equal number of Israeli and Palestinians on each level. Different and distinct uniforms. Independent of the Israeli and Palestinian security forces. In cooperation with the separate Israeli and Palestinian authorities. Address sensitive religious, cultural, and language requirements. Facilitate the operation of the joint economic zones. Investigate corruption by administrators who refuse to teach tolerance. Investigate allegations of intolerance and racist hate crime against Israeli or Palestinians. Assist in managing checkpoints. Guard the Parliament building and threats against members of the Confederation. Facilitate access to and safety of religious facilities. We hereby submit this legislation to the Israeli government, the Palestinian government, and Hamas. We bestow upon them a veto power which may be exercised in the next 60 days.
All right. Does anyone have any questions regarding this legislation for a mutual police force? Okay, hearing no questions, I'm going to have the Palestinian parliament members please vote on the police force. Let's end the polling. Share the results. 13 out of 13 Palestinian parliament members, 100% voted in favor of this. Let's have the Israeli parliament members vote for the vote on this. Hopefully for this, but on this. Okay, let's publish the results. 7 out of 8 Israeli parliament members voted in favor of this. Stop sharing. And let's go to Mr. Wilkerson. Could you, well, this is one of the legislation you chose that we should deal with in the simulation today. Could you tell us why you felt this is an important legislation and what do you think about it, about the vote?
I think it's important for a number of reasons. I can understand why some Israelis, having dealt with Israelis, would be against this because it seems to impinge on their sovereignty with regard to law enforcement and even security. But I think it's one of the most contentious points with all concerned, and it is a preoccupation of the IDF that is making the IDF lose a lot of its real military capacity, as is occupation duty in general. And so I'd want to be free of it, I think. I understand, as I said, why it might seem you were surrendering some sovereignty you'd be sorry about there. But if I could rid myself of that necessity for my security forces and cause a more efficient flow of workers and others between the different entities, I think I'd be for it.
As you know, there is substantial violence right now in Israel, especially in Jerusalem, especially in the holy sites in Jerusalem, especially mostly in the Muslim holy sites.
Yes.
Would all of these violence look even probably disappear if there was a mutual police force, Israelis and Palestinian police officers wearing distinct uniforms, speaking Arabic and Hebrew? Do you think a common police force would have managed what happened in the last 2 weeks better than the Israeli government is managing right now?
The ideal answer to that is yes, but I understand and have dealt with in the past people who are recalcitrant and who don't want basically anything to work that deviates from the current position of superiority that Israel enjoys. That's not so much a criticism of Israel as it is a criticism of specific Israelis. And I must say there's some of that on the other side too, especially with Hamas. So I think it would be a bit contentious, but as we've seen in this simulation, it passed, and I think it would have a reasonable chance for all those things you've said, and the relief it would give the Israeli security forces, and for that matter, Palestinian forces too. I think it would pass. Yeah,
but let's look at it from a Palestinian point of view. A Palestinian he wants to vote to pray at the Al-Aqsa Mosque. And instead of having Israeli police force detaining him or checking him or searching him, not even being able to speak Arabic, he would have a common police force with Israelis and Palestinian people that represents the common government with distinct uniform, being able to communicate with him or her. Wouldn't that by itself make a substantial difference?
Well, I think it would for the Palestinians in particular. I think the anger would go down, the frustration would go down if it were transplanted even onto the Confederation police force rather than the Israelis. But as I said, there are individuals, I think, on both sides that would see this as subtracting from their power and therefore be opposed to it and might do what they could to make it fail.
what justification would they have on either side to oppose this Confederation police force that is managing the holy sites, the Jewish and the Muslim holy sites? What justification would those, the extremists on each side, what justification would they have to oppose a common police force? In my opinion, they will have no justification.
Well, no justification in your and my book, but I've come to understand that there are different books in this problem and in this place.
Yeah.
Um,
Okay.
If,
All right. Let's go to the next one, and that's teaching tolerance and understanding. So, Libby, could you please read this?
Both educational systems to teach tolerance in their public schools. Devote a certain number of hours for both sides to teach the history of the Israelis and the Palestinians. Prioritizing teaching Arabic and Hebrew in public schools to achieve proficiency of both languages by Israeli and Palestinian students. Create a mutual task force to ensure the teaching of both languages. Educators to draft textbooks together and arrange for a regular exchange of teachers. Public media on both sides to provide fair and equal coverage daily for teaching tolerance. IPC as the facilitator to ensure that both sides are fairly represented. We hereby submit this legislation to the Israeli government, the Palestinian government, and Hamas. We bestow upon them a veto power which may be exercised in the next 60 days.
Okay, I forgot to have the police force submitted for veto. Can we have on the previous legislation? Is Hamas leader, are you going to veto the police force?
No, I'm not.
And the PA leader, Dr. Anwar, are you going to veto this legislation for a mutual police force?
Yes, I do.
You are going to veto this?
No, not veto. I am with.
You are with this legislation. And how about the Israeli Prime Minister? Are you going to veto this legislation?
Yes, I'm going to veto it.
And are you vetoing all of it or just segments of it?
I'm vetoing all of it. We
Okay.
have two police forces now. We have the Palestinian police force. We have the Israeli police force. The country's the size of a minute. We don't need another one. And certainly I'm not having anybody coming, double checking what I'm doing on my borders. So I am vetoing this, period.
Okay, but Mr. Prime Minister, you mentioned that you have all these three police forces, but you have violence.
We're gonna have violence forever. I live in Canada. We have
Okay.
violence. We have violence in Canada.
Well, I thought you were the Israeli Prime Minister.
I am, but I'm trying to
Okay.
say I have friends in Canada. They have violence.
Okay,
There's violence all
okay.
over the world.
Yeah. Are you seriously comparing the situation in Jerusalem to Canada?
Yes, they're both liberal democracies.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Okay. So I can tell you, Mr. Prime Minister, as the president of the whole area of Israel and Palestine, representing 14 million people, I am going to work worldwide, including in Israel, including in your coalition, to remove you as the prime minister because you are a danger to peace. You are anti-peace. And I think that you are unrealistic in comparing Jerusalem to Canada. And I think that under your jurisdiction, the Israeli people are in danger, not only the Palestinians, but the Israeli people. And that's what I'm going to do, but we're going to go on.
I see the IPC pretty much the same as the British Commonwealth of Nations. They're a group that get together to work for the benefit of all the people involved. There is no British police operating in Bermuda, or I should say Bermuda, in Australia.
Mr.
or
Prime
New
Minister,
Zealand.
I am sorry, we're not here to talk about Canada.
I'm not talking about
You
Canada.
vetoed a very important legislation.
Yes,
And by continuing to insist on comparison to Canada, you're not going to dissuade me from actively seeking to remove you as a prime minister.
well, you will undermine your own authority by doing that.
Okay, but I am elected. I was elected, and that's
So
why.
was I, so was I.
Yes, and you could work to remove me. That's legitimate.
No, I'm not
And I
going
will
to.
work tirelessly all over the world to expose you as a person who does not want peace.
Go right ahead.
And yeah,
I will not.
I will do that. Let's go to the teaching of tolerance and understanding. Let's have the Palestinian parliament members please vote on this legislation. Palestinian parliament members only.
Don't you want to have Libby read it first?
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought we read it. I'm a little, okay. Sorry, Libby, could you please read it?
I think I did read it.
Oh, okay. So let's have the Palestinian parliament members vote first. Or did they already vote? Palestinian parliament members on teaching tolerance and understanding. Okay, we have published a vote. Stop sharing. Let's have the Israeli parliament members vote. Israeli parliament members, please vote. And please publish the vote. 100% of Israelis and 100% of Palestinian parliament members voted in favor of this legislation. Let's go to the Hamas leader. Mrs. Hamas leader, are you going to veto this legislation?
No, I am not.
And let's go to the PA leader. Mr. PA leader, are you going to veto this legislation?
No, I am not. I am with,
You're accepting this legislation, correct? And let's go to the Israeli Prime Minister. Mr. Prime Minister, are you going to veto this legislation?
No, I'm not going to veto it. I think it's important that children are taught in both languages. There's going to be a lot of issues about trying to teach other people's history. That's not going to work. But basically, I think it's a good idea.
Okay, so that you know, I'm still working hard to remove you, even though you did not veto this completely reasonable legislation. I'm still going to work hard to remove you. But let's go to Mr. Wilkerson and have him give us his opinion regarding this legislation.
Well, I actually think of those things we voted on so far, this is probably the most important one because it works on the youth and it works on the future. And education is more often the solution to intractable problems than people think. So I think this is the most important thing we've done so far.
Right, I agree. Okay, let's go to the next one. And that is redrawing the wall. Libby, could you please read this?
Call on Israel to redraw the wall in certain locations in order to reduce hardship on both the Palestinian and Israeli people while maintaining security for both. And we hereby submit this legislation to the Israeli government, the Palestinian government, and Hamas, and bestow upon them a veto power which may be exercised in the next 60 days.
Okay, let's have the Palestinian parliament members please vote on this. Okay, let's publish the results. 82%, 9 out of 11 voted in favor. Let's go to the Israeli parliament members. Vote. Okay, Let's end the polling and share the result. Okay, and stop sharing 50%. So it did not pass the Israeli parliament member. Those Israeli parliament members that voted against, could you please identify yourself? Israeli parliament members who voted no on this legislation.
Yeah, I'm Taib, right? I voted no.
Okay, and what's the reason you voted no?
I'm just fine with my security. I think they're all animals on the other side anyway, and I'm afraid if I let up my security, they're going to come and kill me.
Yeah, but we have a police force, a common police force. We have a common education. Do you want this wall to stay forever?
No, but you haven't proven to me that if I let up on my security, they won't come and kill me.
What area do you represent?
Sederot.
I'm sorry?
Sderot.
I'm sorry, I didn't, Sderot, you said?
Yes.
Okay, Sderot is near Gaza, correct?
Yes.
Okay, so so you promised to the people of Sderot that you will do whatever you can to make peace with the Palestinians, correct? That's why you were elected.
Yes.
Okay. And you think that maintaining a wall between Israel and right near Sderot and Gaza forever? What proof do you want that the wall is not necessary anymore?
I don't have a wall there. I have a killing zone.
No,
if
you
anybody
do
approaches me, I just shoot them.
Okay, you do have a wall. There is a wall between Gaza and Israel, and the wall does not reduce the number of missiles coming from Gaza to Israel or from Israel to Gaza. It has no significance whatsoever. Correct?
I don't think the wall has anything to do with the missiles.
Correct. And Sderot, the people of Sderot, of your area, are suffering from missiles.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, they're not suffering from the wall. They're not suffering because of if the wall is removed, they're not suffering from that. Don't you want to have a new era in which you both sides send a peace signals to each other?
Yes, but I'm still not convinced that my killing zone isn't working perfectly to protect me.
Okay. To be honest with you, I don't believe that you were elected. I don't understand how you were elected, but as the president of the whole area, I am going to work that you will not be elected again. I think that you are not supporting peace. And I will try to convince the people of your district not to vote for you again, because I think that you are complete fraud.
Mr. President, I think you're completely out of line here. This is a elected member of
I
parliament.
am sorry,
It's
I
an
am the
elected member of
president.
parliament.
I am the president. I am not out of line. I am, my people are the people of Israel, the West Bank, and Gaza. And when I see a parliament member who called my people animals, and I am here to publicly condemn him and call for him not to be elected, for you to say that I'm out of line, you are out of line, and you are exposing yourself.
Can I
by
ask?
calling. Okay.
Can I ask?
All right, let's just go to Mr. Wilkerson and get his opinion.
Do I get a chance to respond?
No, you don't. You only represent your district. And you can.
I'm giving you exactly what my district stands for. I was there 10 days
Okay, you
ago.
voted no. You voted no. I'm not going to give you a public arena to talk to the whole country. I am the president. I was elected by 1.5 million votes. You were elected in a small district. You are not equal to me. I'm sorry.
Then you
You're
have
right.
to respect, you have to respect your own laws, Joseph.
I
This
am
was rejected,
respecting-
this
I
was
am respecting-
rejected.
And I
No.
am the president. I
You're the-
don't have, there is no law that says that.
It's
that I
your
have to
rule,
give
it's
you
your
equal,
rule.
no,
It's-
there is
it's
no
your
law
rule.
that says that as the president, I have to give equal rights to every parliament member who I believe is completely racist.
So you're not democratic. You're not accepting your
I
own
am
rule.
democratic. I
No,
am democratic, but it
The
doesn't.
Israeli
mean that I-
delegation,
No, there is.
they
no-
voted against it, and that's a democratic vote.
I'm sorry,
That's the
I
end
was
of the
elected,
story.
listen to this,
No,
I was
no,
elected
you're
by
the-
1.5 million votes.
And
The
you're,
president
and
of the United States has completely different power than a congressman. Completely different power. You want to put me on the same stage. I am not.
no,
I
I
was
want,
elected
I
by
want
1.5
you,
million votes.
I want you to respect your own rules, which means it takes a 55 and 55 to
I
pass
am.
something.
I am.
No, you did not.
This
You
wall.
did not.
I
You are
am.
not accepting it.
No, I am not forcing this litigation
That's right.
to
So it's
become
closed.
law. But
That's
I am talking about a public arena in which I am working against this racist parliament member.
Yeah.
I am
And
not
when-
saying
and
this.
when
I'm not
Hamas
saying,
calls for
I'm not
killing-
saying this law passed.
That's
I
right.
understand
So
it
it's the
did
end
not
of this.
pass, but I
Then it's
am
the end.
saying that this legislator in a city that is in constant war, who calls people animals, is racist. And as the president, as the person responsible for the whole area, I am calling him as I see him.
Well, you better do a lot of calling in Hamas
Yeah,
too.
well, look, yeah,
Mr.
okay.
President, I voted against it, but I don't see the Palestinians as animals. Would you try to
Well, I
remove
didn't
me
say you
also?
do. I was talking about the president,
I'm
the
an Israeli
parliament member of
parliament member.
Sderot, who called the Palestinian animals.
I condemn that. I'm a Israeli parliament member. I support peace. That's why I'm an elected member in the IPC, but I did not feel the legislation was fully.
Fine. Look, I am not against you having your own opinion. And you could have a legitimate opinion. But this is quite different from a parliament member who calls Palestinian animals. I'm sorry. I respect you if you have security reasons or whatever. But if you call Palestinians animals, then I believe that person should be condemned. Okay.
Mr. President, Ty Ebright agrees with you. I'm only repeating what I heard myself 10 days ago while sitting on the Gaza border. You have to deal with the reality.
As a fellow-
you agree
as a
with me?
fellow
What did you
parliament-
hear? Okay, so now are you retracting your statement that they are animals? Or-
No, that's exactly what I heard from the residents of Sderot 10 days ago.
Okay,
Joseph Alice Brown has her hand up, and then
All right.
Len has his
okay,
hand up.
all right, let's end this, because the purpose of this is not to humiliate each other, is to demonstrate how a common government could work. So that's what I have nothing against you. I hope you understand this is in the spirit of the simulation. It's not, but I am just demonstrating how a common government, how a president will work. Okay, so let's end this and go to the next issue, and I think that's the polling that we are.
There were some hands up. I don't know if you wanted to acknowledge them or not.
Okay, after that, we'll have an open conversation. So before we have the post-simulation survey, let's have Mr. Wilkerson. Mr. Wilkerson, can you give us your opinion of what you just saw about the wall, the discussion and the whole thing?
I think it's clear, at least to me, after a half century plus of very little progress, that the wall needs to come down. But it needs to come down probably in increments, as the discussion here has demonstrated. Is this too much as a first increment? Would we want to bring this legislation up if it were vetoed or voted down? Would we want to bring it up later? Yes, I think so. Because as one person pointed out in the chat, the wall needs to come down. I firmly believe that. I was against the wall when it was built. So that's my view.
Okay. All right. So let's have the post-simulation survey, and then we'll open up for conversation. After participating in the simulation, do you support a common government for the people in Israel, the West Bank, Gaza, and Jerusalem that will coexist with the Israeli and the Palestinian governments? This is a survey for everyone. Please vote. Okay, please publish the vote. 22 out of 23 voted yes. 1 voted no. When we started, 18 voted yes, 5 voted no. So I am very, very happy. This is clearly a change in heart when the simulation caused a change of heart. So let's go to an open conversation now and have people ask questions of our speaker, and then we'll go to concluding remarks. Okay, so Mr. Wilkerson, thank you so much for having us. Do you have a remarks to make before we go to questions? Mr.
I'd just like to say it's my ineluctable conclusion after a half century from President Carter on of dealing with this from a security point of view, that is with the military, and a diplomatic point of view with the State Department, realizing that in the military, I probably did as much diplomatic work as I did in the State Department, that the roadmap, the peace process, such as it was, is moribund. It simply doesn't work. I agreed with George W. Bush when he told Ariel Sharon in the Oval Office that it was his now. I couldn't believe he said it, but he told him it was his because it hadn't worked. President Bush didn't believe it had worked at all. And so he was giving Sharon his head. Do what you need to do. And I'll support it.
What do you mean by that? What did he say that it's his? I don't understand.
The deal, the whole business, the peace process is dead. Do what you have to do, Prime Minister, and I will support you. That's essentially the message that was delivered. And I think that's pretty much been the policy ever since, with some variations on a theme. We need something that might work. I agree. The process is dead. We need something that might work. And I'm willing to try almost anything in that regard, because I think Israel's future is in serious jeopardy if a solution is not found. So that's why I agreed to participate. And that's why I listened as attentively as I could to the deliberations and having all the simulations that I've been listening to over the last 5 or 6 months.
What do you mean by Israel security? Israel is, I don't remember if you said security or is Israel is in danger?
No, I think Israel's future is in jeopardy because she will become an apartheid state full blown. The international community will classify her as a pariah, as it did with South Africa, and Israel can defy that all she likes. Ultimately, it will be to her major discredit and perhaps even her demise.
When you were you pro-Israel or pro-Palestinian when you were in the government?
Neither. I'm very much for a state called Israel in the Levant. I'm very much for a state called Palestine, whatever it might be, in the Levant. I don't think, increasingly, I don't think that's a possibility. I think we're going to have a single state. And if that state wants to be a democracy, if it wants to be a state that does survive, if it wants to be a state that the United States remains allied with through thick and thin, I think it's going to have to become more of a democracy, a real democracy, and therefore it's going to have to support all the people within its borders. And it's going to have to come up with a solution for Jerusalem. Is it the capital of both a Palestinian state and an Israeli state? And for the right of return for those in the diaspora who would like to come back. These are seemingly intractable problems, believe me. When Arafat and Powell met in Ramallah in 2002, I think it was, these were topics of discussion even then, and both men knew that they were whistling in the wind, really.
Were you there?
I was there for part of the time, yes.
I see.
And it's to me, we need something new. We need a new approach altogether. And I would be willing to try this just to see if it would work, particularly if you get the internet election you're talking about and you get the numbers.
How can we do that? How can we get the internet election?
Well, I think you have to advertise significantly and well before it. And you have to get to a lot of people and you have to convince them that this is worth doing.
Good. Okay, let's go to Charles. Charles, you have a question?
Yes. I want to go back to the the discussion of the wall, because it seems to me to be indicative of the IPC is potentially a tool to be able to resolve these very thorny issues. The wall, to me, is indicative of basically a failed security approach. And I haven't done the math, but I imagine if you, taking a look at it, at least currently, you could easily say that the attacks on Israelis are not something that was prevented by the wall. And the idea that the punishment, the making the lives of Palestinians miserable is not going to result in some negative effect on Israelis is a failed strategy. And I think that, you know, those people who are concerned about Israeli security, Taj and Jesse, really need to value that perspective a little bit more. And I'm just wondering, from your perspective, how you think, do you see any kind of a approach to take to make that more apparent in the minds of, you know, people who obviously, for the IPC to become a reality, for this tool to actually work, it needs people to entertain this possibility? Are there things in terms of presenting this? Do you have any suggestions? Lawrence.
Is this a question for me?
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes, it is.
all the questions are for you.
Sorry. Well, as far as the wall goes, I think George Patton was right. Fixed fortifications are a monument to the colossal stupidity of humans. They never work. As far as the IPC goes, and this particular concept of a new approach to the situation, as I said, I'm somewhat excited about it. I would be even more excited after the election And I think that's the key. You have to get enough, you have to get that 5 million or whatever it winds up being. You have to get enough Israelis believing what I think we saw most of us believe today, and willing to take this risk, willing to take a chance on this, that it might be something that will allow the two sides to deal with each other in a meaningful, logical, realistic, and effective way, which has been the problem for 50 years. We simply haven't been able to do that. Even if you go back and you look at Carter and the Egyptian peace treaty, the Jordanian peace treaty, we've been paying Egypt $3 billion+ every year just to bribe them to keep that peace treaty. Even these moments that look like they were clarion moments in the peace process, that we were making progress, have really not done anything. So there needs to be a new approach. And I think if you convince people that there needs to be a new approach, and that it's in their interest to experiment with this new approach, and that this might be a modus operandi for that approach, if you will, then I think you could make progress. I didn't think that way when I started this simulation. I was very cynical, but people in it have convinced me as we went along. Even the obstreperous objectors in it have convinced me that it might have a possibility for success.
Okay, let's go to Len, and then Ori, and then Libby, and then Shiraz.
Okay, I have a question for our guest, but first I want to remind Charles that there were no walls between 1967 and 2000. I myself have driven into Gaza. I've been to Jericho. The walls only came after Yasser Arafat rejected everything he claimed he wanted, a peace treaty, and unleashed the suicide bombers on Israel that killed 1,000 and wounded another 2,000. So that's when the walls came up to stop people from walking across the border. What I'd like to ask Mr. Wilkerson is, a little while back, the Americans proposed the Peace to Prosperity Treaty, which would give the Arabs slightly more land than Jordan and Egypt had conquered in 1949. What do you think of that proposal? And the Arabs never bothered even to respond to it.
Let me first say that I don't think Yasser Arafat, from what I viewed, and for that matter, most of the Palestinian leadership, and a lot of people will not like what I'm going to say, ever was interested in real peace because it threatened their power. And I would even say that about Mahmoud Abbas today and some of the leadership there now. You have the same situation in this country now with my political party, the Republican Party. They don't want to govern because governing means they might have to do something. They might become unpopular. They might even get thrown out of office. That's not what they want. They want power. And that's what Yasser Arafat wanted. He wanted power, and he wanted to maintain that power. As long as you're up against that, I'm not sure that any kind of deal where you don't have some imposing authority, even if it's as anodyne in the beginning as this IPC might be, in order to get it going and get it working. And we haven't covered the point that you could bring up legislation again and again and again, as long as the parliament agreed to do it.
Right.
So you could actually, not force things down people's throat, but you could build political momentum for things. And I even mean that in a negative sense, as Joseph was doing a while ago when he said, "I'm going to campaign against you." So I'm probably not being very articulate, but I do believe that this kind of thing could stand a chance for success, and certainly would be willing to try, because we've run out of options.
But what about the Peace Prosperity Plan?
Well, I don't know that much about it, but I think you would have to have just that phrase. You would have to have something like that as both an excitement for the Israelis, that is to say, their now booming economy, and that's another matter altogether. Israel has become a predatory capitalist state par excellence, with roughly 60 families owning most of the wealth, as bad as we are right now, with the greatest maldistribution of wealth in our history in America, worse than in 1929. I mean, I've seen the stats. It's worse than 1929. So Israel's got to be convinced that its prosperity, its economic success is not going to deteriorate, and the Palestinians are going to have to be convinced that theirs is going to get better, and the one is not going to detract from the other. That's how I look at that sort of thing. But I don't know the details of that enough to comment on it any further or specifically.
Let's go to Ori Bennett. Ori, you need to unmute yourself.
Hello, good evening.
Hi.
Well, I'm in Israel, so it's evening for me. Mr. Wilkerson, I've seen you, gosh, I don't know how to say it nicely, spin conspiracy theories about Israel's control over America on countless news programs that you've been on. So it's shocking to hear you that you're interested in peace versus our destruction. I would love to hear why you're genuinely interested in peace when, even when you're invited on shows to talk about something else, you inevitably bring up Israel, even when it's totally unrelated, as if this is the most important thing on earth, when there's, I think, 52 land conflicts around the world right now. I'm not trying to minimize this one. I see the hurt it's causing on both sides here, and I want there to be peace, and Confederation is a great idea. It's probably the only one that will work long term. But there also needs to be accountability for the other actors who created this problem. 1, the British. 2, Jordan. 3, the Arab League. And until you start bringing accountability and pressure onto them as well, I don't see how this ever ends. Because Israel is still basically a third world country. I don't care what the GDP says. I have been all over this country. I'm an American citizen. I've been here for 2 months now. This is a third world country. And anybody who says anything different is lying. There may be a few people at the top that have a lot of money, but the majority of people here are piss poor. It is not much richer than the Philippines when I visited there. So I cannot stress this enough, that I don't think Israel has the power to solve this single-handedly. And I think that you have to have an Arab League participating, and you have to have especially Jordan participating, because they're part of the reason we're in this mess. They gave everybody citizenship in the West Bank, and then they decided to take it away in 1988. So they were Jordanians, they woke up the next day, they were Palestinians. And if you aren't telling that part of the story, you are manipulating the international public as to what happened here. Thank you.
Well, I don't even know where to go in answering that. There's so much you covered. What I have said with regard to your personal attack on me is that AIPAC is a influence on the US government, a massive influence on the US government. It rivals the AARP and the NRA in terms of its impact on the US government. Unprecedented that a prime minister from Israel came and gave an address to a joint session of Congress and criticized the president of the United States during that address. I don't know.
Yes, that was really gross. I agree. That was really gross. But remember, it's the Republican Party who put
I would
up
say
to that.
too that I accuse you of you call Israel a third world country. I mean, that's going a little far, I think. I do understand the disparity and the maldistribution of wealth there now, but I think I've seen the stats, just like in this country, as I said. And if you go to southern Mississippi, or you go to southern Alabama, or my home state of South Carolina, or the interior of Oklahoma, interior of Maine, you will find third world there too. But I do think that's an epithet that doesn't fit the whole place any more than it fits the whole United States. But my main concern is that there be a future for Israel. And I don't see how there is a future, a tenable future anyway, that involves apartheid and even rougher and tougher procedures than are going on right now with regard to the Palestinians. That's my main concern. And I don't want to see Israel disappear. I want to see Israel there, not just for security reasons, but I also want to see them there because obviously some of the Jewish people want a home and they want that to be their home. And many have made it their home. So that's my main
half of the world's
concern.
Jews live here. Yes.
Yeah, that's
Half
my
of the
main
world's
concern.
Jews live here.
Actually, there are more Jews living in the United States of America than in Israel last time I checked.
All right, let's go to Libby.
I wanted to just bring up something that comes up each time we have a guest, and I think Lawrence, you said something about it as well, about needing relationships between the peoples. We have to start where people see each other as human and equal and making a human connection so that we can want the best for everybody. And I don't know if any of you saw it or knew about it or participated in it, but last week there was a joint memorial ceremony for people who've died at the hands of violence over this conflict over the years. It was a beautiful, moving ceremony with music and passionate stories shared by people who've lost loved ones due to the conflict and the violence. And my understanding is more than 200,000 people participated in that event. That's a lot of people. And this is the 17th year that that event has taken place. And each year it grows in number, indicating to me that the people really do want to build a future that works for everyone. And I guess, you know, a question always lingers with me. How can we get the governments to open the gates to relationship? I know a lot of my friends who are not Palestinian and have wanted to go and meet the Palestinians are told by the Israeli government, you can't go, or if you go, it's at your own risk. In other words, they make it very, very difficult for Palestinians to go into Israel and for Israelis to go into the Palestinian territories, both threatening security. But what I think they really fear is that the people are going to begin to meet each other. And then if enough people really want to see this grow and move into a very creative idea like IPC or something similar, the governments on both sides have to be willing to open the gates so that people can be together and meet each other. And I just wonder what it's going to take to make that happen. How can we get the governments to say, you can go, you can meet freely, but they are fearful of doing so. And I know that there are probably plenty of reasons, but anyway, the people are willing, the people are there. 200,000 people is a lot of people who indicate they want relationships, and that's what it's going to take.
Well, I agree with you. And let me just leap into another situation and try to make a point. Right now, the media in almost every capital of consequence in the world is making the Russians look like subhuman, particularly in London and Washington. The media has become an arm of the government. It's not an estate that challenges the government. It's become an arm of the government. And so you have a situation developing right now with regard to what you just said that reflects Russians as subhuman. I know Russians aren't subhuman. I know some people in every country are subhuman, deserve that epithet. But what you're saying is exactly what's happening now with respect to a country that has 6,000 plus nuclear weapons. This is not something that we should be doing. It is not the way to conduct diplomacy. It is not the way to deal with a conflict like this. I say that because it's a larger example of the microcosm that is Israel and Palestine, because that is really what it is. It's small when compared to what's happening in Ukraine right now. But what's happening in Ukraine is that we are using, we, the United States of America, the supposed exceptional nation, we are using Ukraine to depose Vladimir Putin. We're using Ukraine to destabilize Russia. We don't give a hang about the people of Ukraine. When I say we, I'm talking about the real power in this country. We want to use that country and that conflict to get at Moscow, to get at Vladimir Putin. How do you talk? How do you get people to start saying, enough, we do not need this. We do not certainly need to risk nuclear war. How do you get people to talk? You go through the door, you sit down at the table and you conduct diplomacy. You talk to people rather than throwing bombs, bullets, and bayonets at them. It's the same with this conflict, only it's a little more visceral, I think, because it has lingered and simmered and gone off the rails so many times in the past. You need some place to start to do what you just said. You need some place to start. And that's why I come back to this IPC, because to me, it seems like a place you might be able to start and build on the momentum of starting into something positive.
Let's go to Shiraz. Shiraz,
Can you
please.
put me on the list? Joseph, can you put me on the list of people?
Sure.
Okay, hi. Okay, my question, just short question. What do you think of this Israel and Palestinian war or conflict? Do you think it is a religious war or is it a racial war? Because the way people are labeling each other as if one is much more closer to heaven than the other, like using Bible to justify land claim. And my second question is, what is a relationship between American military industrial complex and Israel military industrial complex? Are they not twins? Or because Israel economy depends on military exports? Just to...
Those are both very good questions. One of the developments in the last decade and a half that I watched in Israel, even when I was at the State Department, is this sort of theocratizing of Israel's otherwise secular government. I don't think that's positive at all. I think your question's implication is right, that when you mix religion, particularly fundamentalist type religion, with politics and governing, you're in trouble. Tehran is another example. I think that as long as you do that, as long as you build these theocratic aspects into your political decision-making, you are aiming yourself for problems, for danger, for trouble. One thing I like about the IPC is that the Constitution makes clear from the very start that it is secular. It is not in any way to be impacted by Islam or by Judaism or any other religion. It is secular. One of the things that frightens me about my own country right now, many of you may not know this, some of you may, Christian nationalism is on the march. I've said, I think we're in a fourth or a fifth, depending on the historian you look at, Great Awakening. 100 million Americans are evangelical. About 48 million of those evangelicals line up with my political party and back it to the hilt. We're having decisions in the Supreme Court right now that may be partly responsible. They may be partly responsible for. Mixing religion and politics is wrong, period. On your second question, the implication of your question is that there is complicity there. There's major complicity between the oligarchs, if you will, of our complex, military-industrial complex, and Israel's military-industrial complex. What some people don't know is that Israel sometimes will sell some of its armaments to our enemies. And of course, we sell our armaments, we forget this sometimes, to Israel's, quote, enemies, unquote. Case in point was when Ronald Reagan, for example, sold AWACS and F-15s to the Saudis, and we had a real brouhaha in this country over it. I remember it vividly. So the complexes collude, but they also operate antithetical to one another and even in competition with one another. And both in Israel and America are dangerous to democracy.
Thank you, sir.
Surely.
Yeah.
Joseph, you're muted.
Thank you.
Okay, Olivia.
Oh, hello, Mr. Wilkerson, and thank you so much for being with us. We appreciate that a lot, and hello to Joseph and to my fellow participants. Mr. Wilkerson, I agree with what you say. This is a war between the US and Russia, and the unfortunate Ukrainians are paying a very high price. And now, as a specialist on international relations, I'm hoping you will enlighten me. Over the last few years, there seems to be a new world order emerging in which the bullies get their way. And the bullies don't pay attention to things like international law, human rights, UN conventions, Geneva conventions, and so forth, so on and so forth. They're just rubbish. Now, in the bully gang, in the bully club, we can put the Chinese leader, we can put the Indian prime minister, we can put in Europe, we can put Mr. Orban and the Serbian leader as well. We can put Mr. Putin, yes. We can put the previous Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu, who ruled for 100 years, and perhaps I would imagine the present one. Now, if this new world order, if this becomes a new world order, and God help us if it does, if the bullies get their way, how do we stop them? Right, we've had an example recently. There was an invasion of Ukraine, and Europe got together and said, "Oh, this is horrendous. This is illegal. This is human rights abuse. This is, something just appalling. We are going to support the Ukrainians," and which they did, and things escalated, and you know what's happening at the moment. So my question is, of course, if this becomes a new world order, and let's hope it doesn't, it would exonerate Israel and would make what Israel is doing perfectly legitimate. Look what the Chinese are doing to their Uyghurs. Look what the Indians are doing to their Muslims, and so on and so forth. We won't go into all the horrors of the world in which we live. But how does one stop these bullies is my question. We did start by, when I say we in Europe, many European countries started by, being very happy, very excited about especially the Brits selling arms to Ukraine. But now you see what's happened. So how does one stop it? By at the same time, as well we all know, we are buying, we in Europe, especially German, we're buying Russian gas and Russian oil, especially gas. So we are supporting the Russians in their attack on Ukraine, and we are it just doesn't, it doesn't work. We're supporting both, really, and we're supporting the killing. But what's the answer? I hoping that you'll be able to explain. Thank you. Sure. Thank you.
All right, thanks.
Surely. I can certainly comment. Your questions are pointed and good. The first thing you have to do is stop being one of the bad guys yourself. And by that, I mean, you need to quit looking like an illiberal democracy yourself. We have had enormous conversations, discussions, fights, arguments, and so forth on the campus at William & Mary over this, as we call it, we political scientists call it, this movement of illiberal democracy. That is to say, the election of autocrats. We forget Hitler was elected in 1933. And what do you do about it? Well, the first thing you have to do in almost every discussion we've had, especially coming from young people, 20, 21, 22, 19, is fix your own boat first, because your own boat is leaking. And one of the first things they'll come up with was my administration, George W. Bush, 2001, 2002, when we actually put in place a state-sponsored, state-sanctioned torture program. Much to my boss's chagrin at the time, Think about that for a moment and the signal that it sent to the rest of the world. For example, when we went to have policy planning talks with the Chinese, one of the first things Wang Yi, now the foreign minister, plenipotentiary for China between the Politburo and the foreign ministry, said to us was, don't talk to me about human rights anymore. Don't talk to me about any of that stuff, whether it's religious freedom for Catholics in China or whatever, because you torture people. Well, you have to start setting the example that you claim you set all the time in order to get this illiberal momentum stopped, in my view. We've done as much to derail, to disassemble, to destroy even the infrastructure we set up post-World War II in order to favor liberal democracy. We have been a part of this, the dismantlement of that. And the oligarchy in this country is to blame for that as much as the oligarchy is in any other country. The plutocrats, I call them, the ones that have created this maldistribution of wealth, because it's beneficial to them, just as it's beneficial to the military-industrial complex to have constant war. One of my students stood up in a seminar recently when I gave the preface in the first seminar and said, "Professor, I've never lived in a country that wasn't at war." Oh, how to bring it home graphically. We have been at war since 2001 and 9/11. And you don't even know some of the countries. We are flying across the air defense identification zone without any permission whatsoever from the government, and using our drones either to surveil or in some cases to kill people. So we're doing this all the time. We're violating international law. Indeed, the invasion of Iraq in 2003 was a gross violation of international law, which Kofi Annan at the time, the Secretary General of the United Nations, pointed out to us. So the first thing you got to do is get your own house in order. That's my point.
Mr. Wilkerson, there are more questions. Are you able to, is it okay? I think we have 3 more people. Are you, or do you need
Sure.
to?
I can go to 2:30. I have another Zoom at 2:30.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Wilkinson. Thank you.
Okay.
I agree with you.
Okay, so let's have, Ori, are you asking another question? Or is
Yes. Mr. Wilkerson, thank you for what you've said since then, and thank you for answering my question. You just earned a fan. Though I always liked your analyses anyway. And we're on the same page. I have a radio show in Los Angeles that I'm doing through Zoom every Sunday now. So, where I talk about these issues, and I would say first, do you agree that America has become an anocracy, which is, I guess, one step? I don't know if that's one step from fascism. I think it's marching down that road. I see all the law changes, now the taking away of women's freedom. I posted on Facebook the other day, I said, congratulations, America. Once Roe falls, you will have less liberal policies than Sharia law Muslim countries when it comes to abortion. I don't think Americans are aware of this, that abortion is allowed in Sharia law. And by the way, I have a great respect for Islam, so I'm not somebody who's coming here with that. I want to see peace.
Can we focus on a question? We have a lot more
Good.
people and we don't have much time.
Okay, go ahead. So let's just stay with the anocracy thing, and then also just quickly, I would say to the British woman that was speaking earlier, don't ever make the mistake of infantilizing one side of a conflict versus another. Palestinians are not infants. Ukrainians are not infants. They're adults that make decisions of how to proceed in conflict. If Ukrainians want to fight Russians, we should let them. But yes, I think the way the America is talking to Russia and saying, oh, we just want to weaken you to where you can't ever do this again, I think that's very dangerous and could lead to World War III. We should not be saying stuff like that. Go ahead.
Let's have Mr. Wilkerson respond. And then the rest of you, please ask succinct question quickly, because we need to go and I need to go too. I have Mother's Day celebration. So please make it quick, and I need to go as well. So go ahead.
I'll make a brief comment on his comments. I think we're at an impasse right now that we're all probably going to regret in this country, in the United States. The Supreme Court is already in the hands of the group I call the autocrats. The Congress will be, come the midterms, I'm told by Democrats, they're going to lose 50 seats in the House and anywhere from 5 to 8 seats in the Senate. And then in 2024, we'll probably get Ron DeSantis of Florida if we don't get Trump again. So the sweep will be complete. The autocrats will be in power in all 3 phases of our government: executive, legislative, and judicial. We've never had this before. The closest we came was our Civil War. That's an interesting comparison.
Okay, let's go to Dr. I.Z. Kovar, and then Omar Huda, and that's it.
Hey, what about me?
Oh, okay, all right. Yeah, I wrote you, Len Bennett, but quickly, please ask a quick question.
Okay, I just want to remind Olivia.
No, now it's Dr. I.Z. Kovar.
Oh,
Thank you. I've joined this group in a strange way, but find it fascinating. The issue that seems to be that we have 2 competing rights, and somehow you have to find a bridge to come across those competing rights. And the suggestion of a confederation might be an option because the other ones will fail. But I guess my question is that we're all stuck with crazies on both sides. And how does one criminalize the crazies to allow the sensible people in the middle to make peace? Because most people want to lead a peaceful life. They want their children to grow up in peace. They want their children to be educated in peace. It's interesting that the leaders of most of these autocratic countries don't live in the countries that they're attempting to brutalize. And that includes many people in Hamas and so on. How do we criminalize the crazies and let the sensible people come to a peaceful solution?
Are you asking me, or are you asking Mr. Wilkerson?
I'm asking you both, because you set up this idea of the Confederation, which I have to say I find very appealing. I mean, I have a grandchild who lives in Israel, and I'm keen on her future. I just wonder how one marginalizes the crazies.
Well, that's a good question. And there are extremists on both sides. The IPC is not going to get rid of them. What the IPC does is unionize the reasonable people on the Israeli and the Palestinian side together, and they would become.
Joseph, until you marginalize the extremists, you will not succeed.
Well, it is marginalizing the extremists, but it is unionizing, putting together the majority of Israeli and majority of Palestinian who want peace, and it would create a much larger group, because the extremists on the Israeli side and the extremists on the Palestinian side are in reality opposite of each other. But the reasonable people on the Israeli and the Palestinian sides are the majority. So that's how you marginalize the extremists on each side.
I'd like to believe, but that's not practice.
Could I just add that you're doing what you said, Joseph? You're doing it through a wholly democratic process, which gives a boost to democracy and gives it a new sense of success.
Right. Okay, let's go to Len Bennett.
Hey, I just want to start off by reminding Olivia that in 1947, though they had no authority, the United Nations suggested breaking up Israel, which was Israel, into 2 pieces, one for Arabs and one for Jews. And the Arabs responded by launching a war of genocide against the Jews, which they did again in 1967. So let's stop worrying too much about what the Jews are doing to the Arabs. And as far as bullies that we talked about, I'd like to ask Mr. Wilkerson, if he thinks there is any worse bully in the world today than the United Nations with its 56 Islamic votes against Israel's 1 vote for every issue in the Middle East.
I'm not sure I'd use the term bully. I think the United Nations does need a major reorganization, and it needs an expansion of the Security Council. It needs an expansion of the permanent members. It probably needs a different veto process. There are a lot of things the United Nations needs, and I left out the thing it needs now, yesterday, and most efficiently is to weed out corruption. We had an opportunity to elect the New Zealander as the Secretary General. The reason she was not elected was because in her role under the Secretary General prior, she had been an absolute poison to corruption. She had rooted it out, root and branch, and she was going to do that with the rest of the UN. And so we, of course, the United States, made sure behind the scenes, we made it impossible for her to be elected. And we got the person that we wanted who was more amenable to our wishes. So the United Nations is nothing more and nothing less than the 5 Security Council members, permanent members, and others too. But that's what the United Nations is. It's to abuse and amuse based on
Thank
the
you.
capitalist.
I agree. Thank you.
We need to conclude. I need to make a closing remark. Let's make this happen. The Israeli and the Palestinian governments have proven that they are not able to make peace. Democracy is equal peace. Democracy is equal equality. And what we are proposing is a true democratic system that would treat everyone as equal and would make peace. In Estonia, a country of 9.5 million people, 40% of them vote online, which means that online election is possible in Israel and Palestine, and we can make this happen. Common election is possible. Just want to remind you that 1 day of war between Israel and Gaza, full-fledged war, is $100 million. $100 million could make this thing a reality. Please, we need financial support. We need you to share, and we need you to tell the media that there is a way to make this thing happen. I want to thank so much. I want to thank Mr. Wilkerson so much. Let me stop sharing. You were a terrific guest. You said wonderful things about the IPC. And I am very appreciative to have such a person of high government, as a high government or previous high government official, give us such a tremendous boost. I could not have asked for better results. And I think that the result is that we have complete change. We had I would say 90% of the people who voted no for the possibility of common government changed their mind. So that's proof in the pudding. I want to thank you, Mr. Wilkerson. You are a true man of peace, and you did a wonderful job. And I want to thank all of you for participating. And I hope to see you next week in the debate. I'm looking forward to that. So thank you so much, and have a great Mother's Day wherever you are, and a great rest of the week.
Thank you very
Enjoy your
much.
celebration. Thank you, Mr. Wilkerson. Thank
And
you,
happy
Joseph. Enjoy
Mother's
your
Day.
party.
Thank you,